Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Welcome to the first official episode of the Special Needs Mom podcast. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a lot of fun. One of the things that my son reflected to me is like, Mom, that music is way too fun for a serious podcast. And I was like, son, that's where you've gone wrong. This is going to be a fun podcast. There's a lot of heaviness, I think, around the conversation about parenting and all the requirements of being a special needs mom. And I really want no part of that. I mean, of course, there is the part where it is serious. And of course, we go there. And I feel like let's also bring the fun and the light and the possibility. And that's what we're going to do here and every episode after. The reason I started this show is that I've talked to mom after mom who has a child with special needs, and I hear the same things over and over and over again. A lot of us feel like nobody understands. We have close friends or family. They don't understand the diagnoses, the medical speak. And literally, I've had close friends be like, I don't understand what you're talking about, which is totally okay. I would never expect them to like totally get it. Like, you know, there's a lot of big words that come with my son's diagnosis. And it is interesting, though, that a lot of people just don't understand, right? So whatever the actual diagnosis is, whether it's behavioral or whether it's medical, it becomes hard to really feel like people get it, right? So we feel like we have this exception and it kind of becomes an isolating thing. So I really want to bring a voice to that and hit it from two angles, actually. Recognize that, yeah, a lot of people don't understand, and you're also not a unicorn. The feelings that you have about being a mom of the children that you are a mom of, guess what? We all feel that way. And so I feel like by actually acknowledging both sides of it, it can be really powerful and create a lot more connection because we're not stuck feeling like nobody understands. With the whole nobody understands thing, it can create a lot of loneliness. And this I also see because when you're parenting a child that has, especially with behavioral challenges, it can become a little nerve-wracking to go out and do the things that a lot of families do, whether it's being limited physically or when you just have explosive behaviors. It can start to feel a little bit lonely. Again, like nobody understands. And I find that there's, certainly for me, things come up when my child doesn't fit into the social norms. I get a little anxious. I get a little, oh my gosh, we're not doing this right. And I really have to calm it down and really kind of put things back in perspective. But the anxiety and overwhelm, they can be debilitating. There's legitimate extra needs that are on your plate every day. And in my case, it happens to be shots and medication management and, of course, a lot of behavioral challenges. And this can feel like a lot. It can start to feel like, oh my gosh, I have all these extra things, so therefore I can't take care of myself. That's just an example. But that's the kind of stuff that comes up, and it's totally understandable. I totally get it. But if we stop there, if we stop at letting that taking care of yourself be possible, then I don't know how else to say it, but that sucks for you and that sucks for everybody around you. And I'm an adamant believer that that's not where we stop, that it is 100% possible. And I get it. You have a lot of really legitimate reasons of why you can't. And also the shame of the should, right? Like we're really going to get rid of that conversation of like, oh, you should be doing this, but you know, for one reason or not, you haven't yet. That's just not fun. I like to identify or label, if you will, the moms I work with as warrior moms. It's how I identify as myself. I don't know. It for me puts it into a picture of someone on the battlefield is so willing to die, first of all, and so committed to the cause that they're fighting for that they are willing to die. And maybe they didn't do anything to actually be in that situation, right? That they are completely unresponsible for finding themselves on the battlefield, yet they come to the battle. They have the sword in hand and they choose to go all in. And that for me is what feels really good. And that's how I want to be as a mom, a warrior for what is possible for myself and of course for my children. And I want you to think of this podcast as a place that it's kind of an unconventional support group. I don't know about you, but when I think about a support group, I think about a lot of people not having a lot of answers, just having a lot of really sad stories and hard things that they're up against. And of course, there's a lot of power in listening and just being with people. But for me, I want the action too. I want to hear the stories and I want to be like, okay, so now what? And leave feeling more hopeful and leave feeling like, okay, I've got this. And leave feeling like, okay, this is going to be okay. And I know everybody's story is so unique. Even if you have a very similar diagnosis, every person has a very different story. And again, so it becomes hard to find a place to belong. But I think what you're going to see is that no matter the difference of the actual content of the story, the things that happen as moms in the inner workings of who we are, in that spirit, in the mind, in the body, are all very similar. So as we go into each episode, we're going to be focusing on how to really create your own lifeline, right? So in life, you're finding yourself managing all the needs of your children, all the needs of your husbands, and probably of your career. You have aspirations in all those areas. And you feel really overwhelmed and anxious, almost dizzy, not even knowing how you're going to get through the next big problem, or let's just face it, like the next series of appointments that you have to go to, whether it be therapy appointments or whether it be surgeries or injections or whatever it is, right? The things that come up that are truly extraordinary, they can feel like such a block to creating a life that's truly fulfilling and joy-filled. I want this podcast to be your lifeline, to be the place where you get inspired and encouraged. And as we connect to each other's journeys, we get to actually step out of being a victim and step into a position of responsibility for your own life. Not responsibility as like, I'm going to be a responsible person and drive the speed limit, but a responsible person actually looks at something and says, I can versus I can't, or versus it's not possible. So now that we have a little bit of a point of reference of what my vision for this podcast is, I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to be here, and really kind of the big picture of what's inspired me to kind of how I identify as a mom of a special needs child. So back as far as I can remember, being a mom was really the only thing I ever dreamed about. I fully envisioned that I would be a stay-at-home mom, which I think is great because it was a little delusional knowing that I was going to live in San Diego, married to a teacher. Anyhow, I really only ever aspired to be a mom. I really never had a lot of professional aspirations. It was always about being a mom. So in 2007, I became a mom for the first time. It was amazing. And then again in 2009. And then almost 3 years later, again, I became pregnant. But during that pregnancy, I had the worst conversation I've ever had in my entire life. And it was a sit-down kind of conversation. And actually, my son, Levi, he was just over 2 at the time. He was 2 and 3 months. And he became unwell. And it was at the end of July. And I just remember it being so hot and so warm, and being the experience I was having inside taking care of this child, being newly pregnant, also taking care of a 2-year-old was it's just, I can still feel it. Right. And so he became unwell, and I kept taking him to the doctor, and doctor kept saying everything's okay. And then it was the sit down conversation, which was our 3rd time to the doctor, where the doctor sits you down and tells you that there's a mass in his brain, that they have treatment options, and that the transport team is coming so that we can bring him to the local children's hospital so that he can get the best care that he needs. And it's that picture of me sitting there in that hospital room is so vivid. And it's just that moment where my life turned from basically perfect to not believing, or to being in disbelief that this was happening to me. It was almost, I could say, like the worst dream I could ever have. I remember thinking before of like, what if something ever happened to my child? I just can't even imagine, right? A lot of people even would say, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Well, guess what? Neither could I. And so everybody kept telling me during this time I was so strong, and they didn't know how I was surviving, and they said I was so brave. And this is during the early days, right, where he's still in the hospital and we're still in the fight. And the truth was, I wanted to run away. I wanted to run into a cave and never come out. I was so scared. It felt too hard. It was something that I just didn't think I could face for the rest of my life. So Levi was admitted to the hospital. We'd stayed 5 days waiting to have a craniotomy. He had a successful craniotomy, and he then went into recovery. His particular type of brain tumor doesn't respond to chemotherapy. So really the only treatment was craniotomy. And if that wasn't successful, then it would be radiation. This particular tumor basically was in the very center of his head. So the approach to resection was quite aggressive, and we had a miracle worker for our neurosurgeon, and we are so profoundly thankful for Dr. Levy. And he is just this Goliath of a man. And I remember when he came to do the pre-op conversation before they were going to take Levi into surgery, he just exuded this confidence of, I've got this. This is what I do every day. I'm going to go take his tumor out, and then we'll be done. And I just am so thankful for the belief I had in him, that he had my son in his hands, that he actually was not, that he was fully capable of doing what needed to be done for my son. And I'm still thankful for the gift that he was to us. So after this craniotomy, it became apparent that there was some secondary brain damage, or what we would call a surgical stroke, as a result of the tumor being vascularly connected to Levi's brain. Turns out you need all of your brain. And so we had about a 2-month hospital stay where we were most of the time in recovery. There was a couple, of course, bumps along the road. And essentially we figured out that Levi lost all mobility on his left side. And early in recovery days, his eye wasn't opening again, so there's some nerve damage. And we would soon find out, or eventually, actually it was over a year until we found out that Levi was fully blind in his right eye. And I think it's so interesting how all of the impact of the surgery rolled out. It was literally over years. We didn't understand the day after his surgery, we didn't understand that he lost mobility. We had no idea he was blind. We had no idea the behavioral impacts, or the impacts that his brain damage was going to have on his behavior. And again, I'm thankful. I don't know that I could have actually digested all of that at one time. And yeah, it's been continual experiences of grief, as it feels like there's been certain things that have been lost of what, feels like shouldn't happen. But for me, it's been really actually great having it not be a sudden blow impact, and actually having little things along the way that, of course, there's things to celebrate. And then, of course, there's things to grieve. We were in recovery for, basically, we still are. We are still in recovery. Actually, it's something that, with any brain damage, the actual recovery period at the time after his surgery, they said it was about 18 months of where they expected his brain to continue to recover. And now we've really transitioned into not necessarily recovery, but a reconnection. So we transitioned from recovery to now kind of what we are in now, and it's just our life. And our life includes still a lot of therapy. In the form of physical therapy, occupational therapy, a little bit of speech therapy, actually a lot bit of speech therapy, as they're really focusing on the social pragmatics, if you will. And as there's some areas where there's some definite deficits, and of course the behavioral aspect, and really the reconnection of what was lost. And for me in parenting this child, one of the things that has been most helpful for me recently has been separating the concept of what I'm responsible for. Because when you have a child that goes to school and breaks things and steals things, it's easy to be the mom. For me, it's like, well, how do I handle this as a mom? Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do here. And I'm a person that likes to do the right thing. And when there's like literally no answer, it can become very emotionally overwhelming for me. And something that's been really valuable was The idea of separating out that I am responsible for teaching Levi and I won't ever stop. Just like the warrior mom that I am, I'm going to find everything that's helpful for him and I'm going to love him fiercely and teach him, and he's responsible for learning. So what that means is I could be the world's best teacher and he still might slam doors when he's mad, or better yet, break doors when he's mad, because slamming would be like way too tame. And just, I don't know, do you guys get that? Like, so the difference of like, I am responsible for teaching him, but I am not responsible for him learning. And I don't know, it might take a second to let that absorb in, but really it's shifting. It's letting go of the control. Like I cannot control him. I think we all know that now as parents. Like if you could control your children, it would be really easy. You can't, nor would you really want to, right? And so for me, it allows me to show up as fully and authentically as who I am and to love him without attachment to him having to do something a certain way or to meet my standard or to not embarrass me. But it allows me to continue to believe in him, that I still believe, even though he's not yet learned certain things, I believe it's possible for him. And so I get to show up relating to him as his highest and best. And I also don't have to get mad when he doesn't act like I want him to. I have to realize he just hasn't learned that yet. And this is a little bit of why I became a coach, right? And I remember early before I was a coach, I remember thinking, okay, I have this child now and we have some solid circumstances that are kind of in the way of the life that I want. And so now what? And I was just diving into, I think, what I was looking for as answers of how do I emotionally get through this? How do I uncover more of who I am so that I can uncover who he is? And of course, my other children as well. But it just so happens, like any big obstacle, it really shows you the big places that you're stuck. And this was a big obstacle. And so I became a coach. I thought, okay, this is the thing where coaches actually look at a circumstance and instead of saying, how do we solve that problem? A coach looks at things differently. Instead of looking at a problem as a problem, we actually just let it be what it is. It's just a circumstance, or it's just what we think is a problem. And we recognize the actual area of opportunity is how we're relating to that problem or the circumstance or the people or whatever it is. And it's only in that awareness of how we're being with something where we can access our own power and change. And there's a lot more involved in coaching and all that. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out. But for me, that's why I became a coach, is because I needed the answers for how I was going to live the rest of my life and not be stopped by this thing that felt so big and that I had no power over. I knew I couldn't change the tumor. Because trust me, I would have. And I wasn't willing to give up the dreams that I had to do that. That's what this podcast is about, is it's going to actually really be looking at circumstances that come up in our life and how we want to relate to them in a way that gives that takes our power back, that actually moves from being the victim of what, things happened to you. You got this child or diagnosis. Sounds funny when you say you got this child. And so now what? I'm going to be doing regular episodes each month. My intention is one a week. That sounds pretty ambitious right now, but we're going to do it. And you can expect to hear stories of other moms just like you. And of course, solo episodes where I get to just talk to you and bring a conversation that has brought value to me. And I trust it'll bring value to you. And something I want you to take away from today is that whether you recognize the challenge or circumstance in your life as actually just a challenge or circumstance, it's not actually the thing stopping you from experiencing the life that you want. It feels so like real when, let's just say I'll use Levi's brain tumor. Or let's even just use his behavior. That's a little bit closer to me now, right? It feels so like I feel like I could talk to any friend and be like, oh my gosh, like It is so impossible to be happy when I have a child that is breaking all of my things. And most of my friends be like, yeah, that'd be like really hard, right? But the actual problem is how I'm relating to it. Is not actually accepting that I have a child that breaks things and recognizing that we automatically put labels of good or bad, right? It's so even probably as you're listening to this, you're like, yeah, and that's a problem. And I could totally side with you on that. But really it's like when we step back and recognize that that actually is not the problem. That because I think that it's a problem that Levi breaks things, becomes a big problem. And then I become very angry or very frustrated or feeling very powerless. But I can choose to have a different relationship with the circumstance that my son breaks things. And that gives it all back to me. And it's totally a process. And I hope this makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, let's talk. But it has been the thing that has totally changed my life. And of course, the lives of my clients. And I think it brings power and it brings light. And I think it brings possibility. So of course, I want to be here with you and answer any question that you have and let me know what you want to hear about. Of course, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor by subscribing to this podcast, of course, rating it and then sharing it. All of us podcasters ask this question because this is how we actually get people the gift of this podcast. And like I said, I'm going to be doing regular episodes. It would really mean a lot if you would subscribe and rate and share. We're going to wrap up today. I think it'd be interesting to give all the different diagnoses that my son has. I'll put those in the show notes if you are interested in the more technical aspects. We're a pretty open book. Levi loves to share about his life. And so I share freely with his openness. Let me know what you thought about this. Thank you so much. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.